So we are going to have the presentation made by Professor Yang Feng, and he is the research at the Guangzhou Institute, researcher of Guangzhou Institute of Respiratory Health, Guangzhou Medical University. His presentation's title is Using the Pathology Philosophy in TCM and treat the COVID-19 cases. I would like to say a few words about Professor Yang. Professor Yang is the assistant of dean at that institute. He is also a research. He is the PI of the National Key Laboratory. As you may know, Professor Zhong Nanshan, he is one of the very capable team member of Zhong Nanshan's team. As the first author, he published 40 publications. Some of them has been cited 141 times. It's quite an achievement. For TCM researchers, you may hear the biomedicine that is kind of the famous periodic journals of TCM. I think some of you may already publish your publications on this journal. This journal is specialized in the compound Chinese traditional medicine formulas, and he is the chair editor of this journal. So, as the interest of time, I just saved a very long introduction of Professor Yang, but I will move the floor to Mr. Yang. Thanks very much for the host. Thanks for the invitation. And it is really my great honor. It's a big event of ICMC. I have been working in Guangzhou for 2 years, so my Cantonese is fluent. But today I will switch to Mandarin. As you may know from the introduction, today I'm going to share with you integrative treatment to the infected disease. This COVID-19 serves as a very typical example of treating this kind of infected disease by integrative treatment. And even in the ancient China, we started to use the Baihu decoctions that serves the very good efficacies. And in the Yangcheng newspaper, in the Yangcheng newspaper, it reported the very sound efficacy of this. So the apologize from the interpreter. The sound at the site is not that very nice. What we should consider now in the current situation, that is how to integrate the TCM with the Chinese medicine. What we are targeting and fighting against together is kind of the pathogen, and I'm not sure how to treat it integratively and just use the two advantages and the strengths from the two subjects to treat this disease with the cooperation of with the cooperation of some of my colleagues. I made up some research publications. We think we need from H1N1 influenza. We set up a comprehensive system of traditional Chinese drugs. And how to treat the pathogens and disperse the heat and detoxifying the treatment. That has been widely used in the treatment of COVID-19. Besides of that, we made up we have some new discoveries that has been proved by the Western journals publications. So that means the pathogen come from the exterior situation could lead to the interior pathogens. I will give you some examples to let you have an idea of what is interior pathogen, what is exterior pathogen. Some gene mutation will enhance the severity of the virus and the transmissibility of the virus. In 2014, I was working with Malapitas of Baptist University. We found two kinds of patients. Patient 4 survived and patient 3 passed away, and we could study the cell factor storm, and simply it can be concluded as a kind of the interior pathogen. When the swine flu was hitting the city, I was working with some Hong Kong colleagues in Chinese University of Hong Kong, and we found something is beyond the secondary infection, that is the bacteria infection, and lead to the kind of we see it interior pathogen. And in 2018, we made some randomized study and a double checking study. So because of those researching experience, we can simply say the development of the syndrome is being driven by the interaction of the interior and the exterior pathogen. You know, Guangzhou was the epicenter of H5N5 influenza, and we used effectively this kind of the integrative treatment to treat this disease. I think that was kind of the new endeavor that treats the infectious disease by the Chinese traditional medicine and the philosophy of it. So what do we say? What is the interior pathogen? That is the virus or bacteria coming from the surroundings, and interior pathogens is the problem or the dysfunction of your interior organs. So in order to restore the harmonious relations and let the interior and the exterior work together to fight against the interior disease, we're using Banlangen. Banlangen can inhibit the replication of the virus and the overexpressing of the inflammatory factors. So that is really a kind of the treatment using interior and exterior pathogen methodology. Some of the you may find this that NFKB is kind of the very effective indicators to show that the Banlangen can be used to treat the inflammatory. And the Liu Shen capsule in Japan is being used to treat heart attack. Later on, we studied that it can be used to treat the interior and exterior pathogens. This kind of the combo pathogen is the feature of the influenza H1N1, and the Liu Shen capsule could adjust the relation of the SM. And could cause, we saw it after the infections because it leads to the interior harmonious messes up, so that leads to the mortality. So because of this, we are trying to find some targets to inhabit the virus and kill this virus, for the purpose of preventing the development of the infectious disease. So we can draw a conclusion that we are not simply targeting the specific virus, we are trying to prevent the transmission and the development of the infectious disease. So this example is showing how we use this treatment to inhibit the expressing of the bacteria and the virus. Liu Shen capsule and other strong anti-inflammatory drugs can use the mechanism of interior and exterior passages to treat the disease. And I have been working in this field for many years, like the dispersing the heat and detoxing the interior toxics. This time, I want to really integrate the TCM with Western medicine to treat COVID-19. So we just categorize those patients to the incubation period, moderate and mild and severe conditions. In the past 6 months, in the P3 laboratories, we studied 700 cases. Simply, we can draw a conclusion that over 80% of the patients have been treated effectively by the TCM. Some cell models is also very clear that to let us know that we are trying to build the harmonious treatment of the interior and the exterior pathogens. Cooperated with a lot of the pioneers in these studies, and we are studying the Lianhua Qingwen capsule. Lianhua Qingwen is mainly used in the preliminary stage of the infection. We call it Qi Feng. In the past 6 years, we have been studying Lianhua Qingwen capsule. This super success is not groundless. It's actually be backed by the past decades of years studies of the clinical practices. And years ago, we published in the periodical peer-reviewed journals on the effectiveness of Lianhua Qingwen capsule. So based on this, we are advancing our study, and we expand the sample size to 248, and we published another paper that letting us know that the Lianhua Qingwen capsule can really help the mild contagion. Because of this solid foundation of this study and the clinical practices, the national authorities revised the description of these drugs in order to make it help better on the treatment of the COVID-19. Many international or English websites have mentioned this kind of the drugs. The mortality rate of COVID-19 is around 5%. China's treatment have long been relying on the injection, but this time we draw the practices from the clinical practices, and we studied those patients in ICU, and we are treating them with this capsule, and later on we find some indicators that are showing the efficacy of this capsule, and we studied the rationales between those changes. The Amilo, the editor-in-chief of this pharmacological research, questioned us the philosophies and the rationales of our publication. So simply, the COVID-19 treatment by TCM, in this aspect, we published 5 papers. I want to let you know that through very thorough, in-depth, and scientific backing study, we can gain the international recognition. Simply, we are learning the mechanism behind it. This mechanism can also serve as the target for the Western drug development. So, what's the conclusion and takeaway today? Interior, exterior pathogens is very meaningful. It can find the kind of the overlapping ground or the common ground with the Western medicine. Based on this common ground, we could build the assessment systems like the one applied to Lianhua Qingwen capsule and the Liu Shen capsule. Because of this, we can get scientific and objective backings, and that could promote the scientific treatment by TCM to the COVID-19. We could diagnose them, treat them, and even prevent them. So last but not at least, I want to show my gratitude at the end to my supervisor, Mr. Zhong Nanshan, and my colleagues at the customer authority of Guangzhou city, as well as my peers from Macau and Tianjin and the Chinese Academy of Science. They give us a lot of suggestions and feedbacks. Last but not least, the most important thing, the message of the day, is my good wishes to the Hong Kong people, and good luck for your fighting with COVID-19. Thanks very much for Mr. Yang's presentation. Mr. Yang is using the harmonious principle of interior and exterior and how to apply this philosophy in the treatment of COVID-19 and the prevention of this infectious disease. Yang did a lot of laboratory studies that proves the efficacy of TCM in treating infectious diseases. You are also justifying the scientific backing from the Western point of view. Now we still have some time, and we want to give this time to our audiences online. If you have questions, please raise your questions online, and I think we have 5 to 6 minutes for question and answer. So audiences online, do you have questions? Feel free. If we don't have available questions online, I have my questions. I will take the chance. So I want to ask, you have done a lot of laboratory studies in these aspects to the treatment of the COVID-19, like the virus, and I want to ask, is that only P3 laboratory can cultivate this kind of the virus? Thanks for your question. Virus is being stringently regulated by the authority of China, and some kinds of the virus, if they are not quite infectious, can be studied and cultivated in P2 level labs. So for a long time, our lab is doing this level of the nourishing jobs. But for some kind of the very infectious virus, it can only be studied in P3. But because of this outbreak, our laboratory has been leveled up to P3. Because of our sound foundation, it is very easy to transit and escalate ourselves from P2 to P3. So I just let you know the system and our strategy. That means we did sufficient preparation even at the level of P2. So at the emergency, we move up to P3. So we got the very good chance and the timing to grab this opportunity and did a lot of study. Another question, I read some of your publications on those journals, on those academic publication platforms. I want to ask, are you using human samples or animal samples? Which is more? Again, thanks for your question. This time, for this study, we want to internationalize the TCM. We want to gain the international recognition and gain the credibility from our Western peers. So we use both human and animals in order to support us better. So the Lianhua Qi capsule, we have 248 samples. They are all humans. Some of those are patients, some of them are recovered patients. So I want to check if there is question online. I think there is one question online raised by the online audiences. I'm not sure if you can really hear us or see this from your end. It's asking the animal trial. Have you found the immunity reaction of animal trial? What's the differences with the human immunity reactions? What's the common sense and the differences? It's a really good question. Of course, there are differences. The study of COVID-19 is not mature at all. The system is not mature. We are using rats, and Hong Kong U staff is using different kinds of the mass. So we are even using different species of the mass. Because of the different species of the rats, they may yield different results. And for the human studies, the different moderate conditions, mild or severe, they may yield different resources. Though we have 6 months, this is the best we can get. For influenza, we are studying it for 2 decades, so it's more mature. Now we are studying the host of COVID-19 of H1N2. So we are trying to intimate closer to the host cell of the human body. But even we trying so hard to simulate the host of a human cell, but the proportion, the body condition are still different. Just now the question is raised by Mr. Anson Chen. Thanks very much. Or any other questions, please feel free. If not yet now, thanks again to Professor Yang. Thanks for your marvelous presentation. Thanks all the audiences in Hong Kong, and good luck for your combating with the COVID.
So, okay, let's go back to our first speaker. He is the researcher at the 5th Medical Center of People's Liberation Army General Hospital and the director of the PLA Chinese Medicine Research Center. And he is a director of the TCM committee. And he is also a member of a TCM specialist committee. He is a co-chair of Integrative Medicine and Treatment Center. He is an award-winning medical researcher and was listed in the top 10 outstanding youths in China. Professor Xiao is an expert of clinical research and drug development, and he's a specialist in the treatment and prevention of liver damage and injuries. And he has 2 projects that awarded second prize at the Chinese Technological and Scientific Progress Awards. And one of his awards has been approved by CFDA. And he had published over 330 papers in Chinese international journals. He has been quoted over 12,000 times in various papers and journals. So today, Professor Xiao will be giving a speech titled "The Wisdom and Strength in China's Fight Against Epidemics: Integration of Chinese and Western Medicines." First of all, thank you. Thanks to both moderators for your introduction and for the invitation. Now, my speech today is about China's fight against COVID-19 with the integration of Chinese and Western medicines. So, COVID-19 is the biggest public health emergency in the world right now. I myself was involved in the prevention and treatment of the disease in the state-led effort. So I'm very moved by people coming together in China and fighting this disease together. And I've witnessed a lot of progress in the research and treatment of integrative treatment on COVID-19. So this is my brief report on what I've seen in the research. So COVID-19 is the biggest public health emergency. A lot of people compare it to the Third World War. The previous two world wars were human against human. This time is human against a virus. So the breadth and depth of its impact is unprecedented. And it's probably changing the global political and economic landscape. Right now we have over 20 million cases, and the death toll has amounted to 734,000, and it's impacted 7 billion people in 210 countries and regions. So in China, we are having the nationwide coordinated fight against COVID. And I think we've done a good job so far. Basically we controlled the situation within about 6 months. So this is really a feat, and I think there are 3 major reasons why that happens. Because first of all, it's a coordinated effort throughout the country. Second, we put lives at our top priority. And thirdly, Chinese doctors and researchers used integrative treatment combining TCM and Western medicine. So I think this is the integrative treatment is really a major characteristic and highlight in our fight against the pandemic. And this is the integrated treatment we used in 91.5% of all confirmed cases in China. And the efficacy rate is proven to be over 90% as well. And we used 3 drugs and 3 treatment plan. The 3 drug is chloroquine phosphate and remdesivir and favipiravir. And the 3 plant means convalescent, plasma, stem cell, and traditional Chinese medicine. So within Chinese medicine, we mainly use 莲花清瘟 capsule, 金花清感 granule, and 血必净 injection. So let's look at the patients. Over 80% of COVID-19 patients from mild to moderate cases, and 20% are severe and critical cases. So those critical cases can have acute respiratory distress syndrome, and they don't recover well after the virus turned negative, and it really squeezes medical resources and sometimes even cause social panic. So I think ARDS is really the greatest threat on the lives of patients. It's the same case with SARS and MERS. So I think ARDS is the occurrence rate of ARDS is the greatest indicator for treatment. So the 5th medical center at the PLA General Hospital is one of the first hospitals to treat COVID-19 patients. So we use a multitude of research methods and involve both clinical team and scientific research team. working together to screen effective formulas. And in the end, we based our treatment and drug development on the Keguan #1. So when we started, after 5 days after we concluded the research, we published a paper on a major medical journal in China. So we did the screening of 3 types of drugs in TCM drugs. So based on the screening, we used the effective drugs in clinical trials. So we used different drugs for different targets and yielded different results. So there are 2 drugs that we found that have yielded good results. So this is after we compared to the baseline, we saw a lot of differences and improvements, and identified 9 effective ingredients. And we realized that the integrated treatment plan works better than a Western medicine only or Chinese medicine only treatment plan. So I think this is so when we see an improvement of 26.1% in terms of symptom alleviation. So we had a patient number 39 who recovered within 10 days. Whereas using a Western medicine, patients tend to have an average convalescence period of 20 days. So we found a lot of improvement in our mouse models. So really the result is very obvious. So we did a prediction of the mechanism, because we developed a theory of treating the external symptoms to restore internal health. So the mechanism, the IC2 protein is so we found the receptor. 你能找一下到底是哪一页吗？ So the use of TCM can stop the binding of IC2 protein. And can treat the vascular diseases. And help with the cytokine storm. So this is the theory that we developed of treating the external symptoms in order to restore the health. There's a tenure chair professor, Zheng Yongqi, in Yale University, and also approves that this theory.
Professor Jin Guangqi is very influential in this aspects because this formula is free from Ma Huang. It can be easily accepted by the Western patients. And how to connect our TCM philosophy to the Western treatment philosophy, that could be the entry point for the for TCM internationalization, because it easily gets the recognition from both TCM and the Western treatment. I think the integrative treatment can play the role more than in the treatment of COVID-19. You know, the civilization history of human life is marked by the combating with the infectious disease as well as the development of the drugs. So through the development of the medicine and the drug development, we establish this doctrine and we achieve one achievement upon another achievement. So simply you can say in the ancient times we have a lot of the famous texts recording those infectious disease and the treatment of this. And in Tang and Song dynasty, after 1,000 years, they reach a new peak in containment, in treatment and containing the infectious disease. Later on, and in the Qing dynasty, they have machine detection, which is still widely used in the treatment of the infectious disease nowadays. I think those development of those intellectual achievements is the driving force of the human civilization. Even until today, we know Professor Zhong Nanshan and is also making a great achievement in the civilization. So we really want to restore and how we started this infectious disease treatment. And previously we actually have diagnosis and treatment and vaccine, but you know, in the ancient time, China has the very primitive idea about vaccinating the population and suspecting patients to cut the transmissibility of this infectious disease. And we all know the Nobel Prize laureate Tu Youyou is making the achievement by drawing the strength from the traditional medicine. And WHO, the Chinese combating experience with SARS has been recognized by WHO. At that combating, our hospital joined in the endeavor to combating with the COVID-19. And we, both of us, and many of our colleagues was one of the team member at that time. Now, later on in 2010, we have H1N1, and we are using the Ma Shigan detection and Inqiao-san through the variation of those traditional formulas that can be used in the effective treatment of those patients. In 2014, our hospital, I want to mention it especially, we promote the Qingwei Baidu detection outside of China used in the Ebola treatment. So we can simply say there is a great potential for TCM. Now we have another larger, more challenging task.
So WHO gave COVID-19 its name it's February. But I like to call it a fearsome mystique. Because why? All the symptoms really vary from person to person. The incubation period is uncertain. You can have false positives and negatives very easily, and you can have a lot high transmissivity and very high severity rate and fatality rate, and the virus can spread in a multitude of ways, from respiratory tract, from digestive tract, from droplets, breast milk, aerosol, elevator, door handle, feces, sewer, everywhere. Even Dr. Anthony Fauci said he has never seen a virus as weird and unpredictable as COVID-19 in his 50-year career. So the main pathogen of COVID-19 is the RNA virus, which is highly variable and self-limiting. So of course, if we can invent a vaccination for it, that's the best way. And antivirals are also very good, but at the moment, their accessibilities are very low. We cannot achieve those. So right now, I think Chinese medicine, especially in China, is the next best thing we can have and really gives hope to the masses. So I think we can compare the COVID-19 to a robber, because we don't know who he is, how he enters our homes, what's his weapon, and when he entered our homes. So there are a lot of things that we don't know about this enemy. And I think the Chinese medicine is really good at finding out how it works within the system, the etiology and the pathogenesis of this disease. And at the same time, Western medicine is good at treating it. So I think the integrative treatment for COVID-19 is the best model for China's future fight against pandemics. So we call it we medicine. Means a Western and Eastern medicine integration. So I think we should really abandon the outdated view of the segregation of Western and Eastern medicines, and we really need to approach it with a holistic view. I think this is the one of the best principles we can have going forward, is to not separating medicine, schools of medicine or schools of drugs by Western and Eastern. So right now we have in our hospital we have 6 newly developed new drugs for liver diseases. We have some of them have been certificated National New Drug Certificate, and some of them have obtained national clinical approval. One of them is 六味五灵片, which is effective in treating a variety of liver injuries. And there are other drugs that helps with hepatitis, liver fibrosis, ecteric hepatitis, steatohepatitis, and viral hepatitis. So we had some of these drugs have finished phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials. So there's a lot of liver. So we have developed a very holistic view of viewing and treating liver diseases. So some of them are developed before 2010. All of them are developed before 2010, and after 2010, we have made a lot of progress in testing these drugs and using them in clinical treatment. So, and then we have developed a very systematic integrative treatment plan for viral hepatitis in different stages, going from preclinical prevention all the way to clinical prevention and convalescence. I think we really need to internationalize TCM and really make it an open resource for the international societies. Because our world is interconnected world. We have one homeland, one family, so we need to use one medicine. Because our human species really had one origin, is from East Africa. Human civilization can be traced back to 8,000 years ago. And since then, we've been fighting against various diseases in different parts of the world for thousands of years. And the Chinese have developed a very comprehensive system in our 5,000 years of civilization. So we really need to promote our good drugs, effective TCM drugs. And we need to help other countries, whether developed or underdeveloped, with their medical capacity building and understanding of TCM. And we want to contribute our wisdom and our strength and our knowledge of TCM in the future for the international community. So I've gladly seen a lot of international interest in TCM, especially during this pandemic. So I think we want to be very sincere in our efforts in promoting TCM, and we are earnestly wanting to see the true integration of Chinese medicine and Western medicine. And thank you for your listening. Because I have a bad reception here, so I can only talk with my audio. So thank you.
Thanks very much for the director, Mr. Xiao. Even there is the small technical glitch, but we are quite flexible to solve this issue, and we use the alternative connection channel through WeChat, and we have very sound presentation. You are depicting the Chinese wisdom of treatment of COVID-19 through the integrative treatment. You talked about 3 traditional formulas and your #1 treatment program of COVID-19, and offer also a lot of examples and case studies. And for these emerging issues, you're using your practical clinical practices and the experience of developing new drugs. So it's really amazing and fabulous. So now I think we still have 2 or 3 minutes to take one or more questions. So if there is question, let's check online. That's the interest of the time. I don't think we have the time to take any questions at all. So last, I would like to congratulate you again, Mr. Xiao. Thanks for your time. Thanks very much. The honor is actually mine, and apologize for the kind of the poor connection you may suffer. So now let's move to the very last one for the morning session. the third speaker from the session 2. She is the vice principal of the Shandong University of Traditional Medicine, Professor Rong. She will talk about the famous formulas, effective substitutes, and the functioning mechanism of those traditional formulas. So before passing the floor to Professor Rong, I will say something about the marvelous background of Rong. He is the supervisor of He is also the director of the key laboratory of the TCM. She has a lot of other titles and jobs as well. Of course, it means a lot of commitment. She published over 100 papers on the core journals in home and abroad, and some SCI papers overturned, and one textbook compiled with Rong as well. So, as the interest of time, this is the very brief introduction of Professor Rong. Now, I will pass the floor to Rong.
Hi everyone. Hi. Good morning. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity for me to kind of give a brief introduction of our recent work and research. So at Shandong University Traditional Medicine, we have done a lot of recent research on analysis on the mechanism of action for柴胡桂枝decoction for the treatment of external 肝郁脾虚. So this is our report. So I'll give you a little bit of a background of the research. Now, before COVID-19, we had a long history of troubles with influenzas. And this is a major public health problem. So it is an acute respiratory infection caused by influenza virus. It's divided into 3 types, A, B, and C. And influenza A viruses are divided into many subtypes. So H1N1 is one of the major types that affects humans. So this time we will be focusing on H1N1 flu and how柴胡桂枝decoction can help with the treatment. So apart from the elderly and senior citizens, there's another vulnerable group for H1N1 flu, which is young and middle-aged people, because they live with a lot of stress and sometimes even depression. So, and then they suffer from a lot of anxiety and irregular habit in their daily lives. And this can, for young people and middle-aged people, they can cause stagnation of liver energy, which leads to spleen dysfunction. So in TCM, we call it 肝郁脾虚. Now, according to our survey, we found that 22.1% of people young and middle-aged people actually suffer from 肝郁脾虚. So when 肝郁脾虚meets flu season, it can cause a disease is called external 肝郁脾虚. So let's talk about 柴胡桂枝decoction. It's a main formula to treat 太阳 and 少阳 syndromes. It has 9 different herbs. So it really expels the heat and the external pathogens in the body. And it really helps, it really benefits the spleen and the stomach. So 柴胡桂枝decoction for external 肝郁脾虚 is a very good and precise treatment for external 肝郁脾虚. So here are some of the key steps of our research. Now, basically, the most major step in our route is research on the efficacy and mechanism based on mouse models. We also have done a chemical characterization of the decoction. And we have done an in vitro antiviral activity assay based on CPE, and have done a spectral effects correlation analysis on the ingredients of the decoction. This is a technical route, so we will go into it in detail. First of all, we have the fingerprint characterization and chemical composition analysis. We established a fingerprint of HPLC at DAD. And also we did the content assay on all the ingredients and did a qualitative analysis on them. This is the HPLC DAD fingerprint spectrum. So we gave the several samples liquid to establish the fingerprint. We used the 230 nanometer chromatogram, and we used extractions from the effective parts of the compounds to do the testing. And we've done qualitative analysis on the chemical composition of the compound and also the polar parts of this decoction. So we compiled a lot of existing research and research results and as reference, and also built a database around that. And based on the chromatographic retention time and precise molecular weight and fragment peaks and mass spectrometry information of the reference substances, and combined with the research information we have and the structures of the chromatographic peaks, we identified 53 compounds. So we identified 53 compounds, and this is a list of them. So we also identified a few major groups, such as柴胡皂苷group and Huang Tong Gan, and organic acids. So this is a table of all the compounds that we found. So when we have also done a in vitro analysis and done the CPE-based antiviral activity research on 3 viruses, H1N1, COX-B5, and RSV Hep2. And we've done research and calculation on the half toxic concentration and half effective concentration. And so these are the TI scores of the 3 viruses. The decoction suppressing function on the 3 viruses. So we realized that it has a very good effect in suppressing RSV virus. And we have done an intervention study on our mouse models. So we focus on, and because 肝郁脾虚 is internal disease, but external 肝郁脾虚 is induced by influenza virus. So we did animal trials and observed the rectal temperature and body weight and their eating and drinking habits, and to evaluate its 脾虚 conditions. And we have also done certain experimentation, such as the open field experiment, tail suspension experiment, and we used the HBLC determination of DEA in brain tissues. And in terms of spleen, we used amylase and ELISA gastrin to induce the 脾虚 symptoms, the spleen deficiency symptoms. So these are the things we did to kind of replicate the external 肝郁脾虚 symptoms in our mouse models. And then in terms of evaluation of the virus infection, we use the viral load and pathological tissue section, as well as organ index and body temperature and body weight. And then we use the qPRC technology to do a comparison on double reference genes. In cytokine protein expression, we use CBA system and a quantitative calculation of the standard curve. So this is the CBA system that we used in testing. So we used use smaller and larger beads to let them go through a reaction hole to target the protein load. So these are some of the results we got from the model copy. The rectal temperature hasn't changed much, but we saw a drastic drop in body weight. And for behavioral observation, we from our open field experiments and the tail suspension experiment, we saw that their behavior is also deteriorating. And we have seen symptoms in 肝郁脾虚 from the amylase and gastrin levels, as well as liver and adrenaline index, and we saw a drop in their immunity levels. So after successfully replicating the 肝郁脾虚 model, we then use 柴胡桂枝 decoction to intervene with the symptoms. So we used the low, medium, and high doses of 柴胡桂枝 decoction, and for comparison, we also used a controlled healthy group and also a group of mice that was administered 莲花清瘟 decoction. So we found that 柴胡桂枝 decoction has been effective in modulating the body weight and rectal temperature. We also observed the viral infection conditions by looking at the H1N1M gene expression and lung index. And we saw a very obvious great intervention from柴胡桂枝groups. When we're looking at the lung tissue sections, for the model groups, the mice suffered from very obvious pulmonary infections. And you can see that compared to group A, which is a healthy group, and you can see all the other groups have a lot of blood stasis and a lot of damage to the cells. So the group D, E, F were on柴胡桂枝decoction, and A, B, C are control groups, healthy and ill, and also on 莲花清瘟 decoction. So you can see the comparison between group A, B, C, and D, E, F. So these are some of the other indexes that we looked at, including brain tissue DA amount and drinking and eating amount, and also gastrin in serum. So we see that the ABC groups are not reacting very well to the virus, but once we put the mice in柴胡桂枝decoction, we see have been very effective in treating the symptoms in terms of intervention. These are the organ indexes. Because we don't have a lot of time, I'm not gonna delve very deep into it. And we also have done Th1 and Th2 cytokine changes. So we've done some tests on that. So, and you can see the relative expressions apart from the Th2. All the other indexes have been very well improved. So I think there is a correlation between Th1 and Th2. I think Th1 has a strong correlation with cell immunity, and Th2 has a strong correlation with body fluid immunity. In the cytokine, you can see a lot of correlation with Th1. And there are some other indexes that are correlated more strongly with Th2. So we also tested some changes in the ketotime balance. We can see that there is a strong correlation between the amount of drugs that were administered and the alleviation of symptoms. So I think there is a balance between Th1 and Th2 cytokines. But when a body detects illness, the balance is broken. So when we gave our patients, the mice,柴胡桂枝decoction, we can restore this balance. And I think this is another evidence of the mechanism of action of 柴胡桂枝decoction on external 肝郁脾虚. And we also use spectral effect correlation analysis. this is to look at the different ingredients of the decoction and how they react to the symptoms in the treating of the disease. So we used柴胡桂枝compound and also different polar parts. So we used both the compound and the 4 polar parts to observe how they affect the indexes. For example, weight, rectal temperature, pulmonary tissues, and viral load, as well as liver index, as well as serum gastrin. So, as well as the DA in brain tissues. So how all these ingredients can affect all these indexes. So we got 10 variable identifications, and we did a comprehensive evaluation of the indexes to this. So this is a PLSDA that combines all the pharmacological index. And then looking at different parts. Now we can see. So we can see the efficacy score comparison of different polar parts and柴胡桂枝compound. So we can see that the compound actually works the best, while at the same time the dichloromethane actually works the worst, the weakest in this compound. We also done the correlation analysis of peak intensity and comprehensive therapeutic index. So we looked at all the chromatography peaks, and we found 13 of them that are over 1 in its VIP score. And we found that the 14, 15, 33, 40, 27, and 30 peaks are contributing the most to the alleviation of the symptoms. So we have identified that the柴胡桂枝decoction can effectively increase the body weight and rectal temperatures and water consumption in model mice. And then we saw a lot of, it is related to the downregulation of the cytokine expressions. So that's my research. Thank you.
Marvelous. What a splendid presentation. Rong just used a model that is Gan Yi to test the efficacy of the famous formula or very deeply rooted existing formula, the柴胡桂枝decoction, and she did a very in-depth, detail-oriented study, and she depicts the correlation and the balances between the different active substitutes. So if there are any question for Rong, I have a question for you. You just now let us know the model that is Gan Yi and Pi Xu, that it means excessive of liver function and deficiency of the spleen, but the bacterial group of the intestine, the intestine tract, what's the relation? we are putting our attention to TCM's function and effects in adjusting the bacterial group of the intestinal system. So I think we just done the very primitive study, so it's not the good timing to share with you the data. I can simply let you know, at the early stage, we do some observations on the TCM's influences and interventions on the balances of this bacterial group, and how TCM will influence the different amount distribution in the system. We are doing a lot of observation, but I should please bear with me. It's quite shallow now. I have another question, and very quick. You studied H1N1 influenza and its connection with 肝疫脾虚. Now, COVID-19 is just around us. So, do you think this formula is effective to COVID? You know, data speaks louder than our assumptions and our words. Generally, TCM has a role to play in adjusting the immune system and enhancing the immune system of human beings. Of course, it's beneficial, but you know, I keep myself updated with the development, also the clinical behavior and the clinical conditions of COVID, because of the individual differences. Those kind of the variations is very huge, it's very large. So I want to emphasize we should differentiate and individualize the treatment plan for each patient, even we want to treat it with TCM. I think the柴胡桂枝decoction, whether it's effective in treating COVID, it's quite interesting and worth researching. But if I have time and the resources, I will do it. I will give it a go. Thanks very much, Professor Rong. Thank you again. Thanks to the host as well. Thank you very much. Now, this is the end of the morning session. We will resume our session in 2:30. We will have session 2 of this conference, and we will wait you here online.